My son's therapist called me yesterday. Not to schedule an appointment. Not to discuss his progress. She called to apologize for believing every lie my family told her about me. For 3 months I thought I was losing my mind. Today I discovered I was just losing my family. My phone rang at 2:47 in the afternoon, and the woman on the other end said 5 words that changed everything. "Mrs. Caldwell, I owe you an apology." What she told me next made my hands shake so badly I had to sit down on my kitchen floor. I'm glad you're here. Stay with me until the end because this story gets darker before it gets lighter. And I promise you'll want to see how it ends. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Diane Caldwell and I'm 63 years old. 3 months ago, I thought I had a close relationship with my son Marcus and a decent relationship with his wife Vanessa. I lived in the house where I raised Marcus alone after his father left when he was 6. It's a modest 3-bedroom ranch in the suburbs with a garden I've tended for 30 years and a front porch where I used to sit every evening watching the neighborhood kids play. Past tense. Used to. Because 3 months ago, everything I thought I knew about my life turned out to be a carefully constructed lie. It started so gradually that I didn't even notice at first. Marcus began calling less frequently. When he did call, the conversations felt strained, like he was checking items off a list rather than actually talking to me. Vanessa stopped inviting me to family dinners. When I asked about visiting my grandson Leo, there was always a reason why it wasn't a good time. Leo has a cold. We're redecorating his room. Vanessa's mother is visiting. The excuses piled up like autumn leaves, and I told myself I was being paranoid, that young families are busy, that I needed to give them space. Then came the day Marcus showed up at my door unannounced. It was a Tuesday morning in late September, and I was surprised to see him because he usually worked until 6. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot on my porch like a teenager about to confess something terrible. "Mom, we need to talk. Can I come in?" "Of course, sweetheart. I made coffee this morning. Let me pour you a cup." "I don't want coffee. I just need to talk to you about something important." We sat in my living room, the same room where I used to help him with his homework, where we watched movies together when he was sick, where he told me he was getting married. The late morning sun came through the windows I'd washed just the day before, creating patterns on the carpet that seemed too cheerful for whatever conversation was coming. "Mom, Vanessa and I are worried about you." The words didn't make sense at first. "Worried about me? I'm fine. What are you talking about?" Marcus pulled out his phone and showed me a series of text messages. Messages that appeared to be from me, sent at odd hours of the night. 3 in the morning. 4:30. Messages that rambled and repeated themselves. Messages asking the same questions over and over. Messages that sounded nothing like me, but had apparently come from my phone number. "I don't understand. I didn't send these." "Mom, you did. Look at the timestamps. Look at the phone number. That's your number." But I was asleep at 3 in the morning. I don't even keep my phone in my bedroom at night. You know that. Marcus's expression was patient in that horrible way that adults look at confused elderly people. That mixture of pity and frustration that makes you feel like you're already halfway to losing your mind. "Mom, that's part of what we're worried about. You're not remembering things. Last week you called Vanessa 4 times asking what time dinner was even though we'd told you we couldn't do dinner that week. 2 weeks ago, you showed up at our house at 7 in the morning saying we'd made plans for breakfast. We hadn't made any plans." I felt heat rising to my cheeks. Yes, I had called about dinner, but only twice, not 4 times. And I was certain Marcus had mentioned breakfast when we talked the previous weekend. I had it written in my calendar. I showed him the calendar entry, written in my own handwriting. "Mom, we never said that. You must have written it down wrong or maybe got confused about which weekend." "I'm not confused. I know what you said. This is exactly what I'm talking about." Marcus ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I recognized from his childhood when he was stressed. "Mom, Vanessa and I think you need to see someone. A doctor. Maybe a specialist. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm just tired. I haven't been sleeping well. That's another thing. You told me last month that you were sleeping great. You said you'd never slept better. Now you're saying you haven't been sleeping well. Which is it?" The conversation continued in circles like that for another hour. Every example he gave of my supposed confusion had an explanation, but Marcus had an answer for each of my explanations. By the time he left, I felt dizzy and uncertain, like the ground beneath my feet had turned to water. 2 days later, Vanessa called. Her voice had that syrupy sweet tone that some people use when they're trying to sound caring but really just sound condescending. Diane, Marcus told me about your conversation. I just want you to know that we're here for you. We want to help. I don't need help. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself. Of course you are. Nobody's saying you aren't. But sometimes as we get older, we need a little extra support. There's no shame in that. I'm 63, not 90. I go to the gym 3 times a week. I volunteer at the library. I manage my own finances. I cook my own meals. What exactly do you think I need support with? Vanessa sighed, and I could picture her exchanging a look with Marcus if he was in the room with her. That knowing look that says, see what I mean? Well, for one thing, you've been having some memory issues. And Marcus mentioned that your house is getting a bit cluttered. Maybe you're feeling overwhelmed with upkeep. My house is not cluttered. I cleaned it from top to bottom last weekend. Diane, when Marcus was there on Tuesday, he said there were dishes piled in the sink and laundry all over the guest room. That's a lie. I had 3 dishes in the sink from lunch, and I was folding laundry in the guest room because that's where I always fold laundry. The washing machine is right next to that room. Okay, maybe cluttered was the wrong word. But you have to admit you've been forgetting things. The text messages, the confused phone calls, showing up at our house when we didn't have plans. I wanted to scream. I wanted to reach through the phone and shake her and demand she tell me the truth about what was really happening. But instead, I just felt this creeping sense of doubt. What if they were right? What if I was losing my grip on reality and didn't even know it? Look, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'll go see my doctor. I'll get checked out. Will that make everyone feel better? That would be wonderful, Diane. And actually, I've already taken the liberty of finding someone for you. Dr. Patricia Reeves. She's a therapist who specializes in cognitive issues in older adults. I've made an appointment for you next Tuesday at 2. The presumption of it took my breath away. She'd already made an appointment. Already decided I needed therapy. Already labeled me as someone with cognitive issues. I can make my own appointments, Vanessa. I know you can. I was just trying to help. Dr. Reeves is very good. She's actually Leo's therapist too. We've been taking him to see her for some anxiety issues, so I know her well. She's very understanding. Something about that felt wrong. Why was my 8-year-old grandson seeing a therapist for anxiety? When did that start? Why hadn't anyone told me? What's wrong with Leo? When did he start having anxiety? Oh, it's nothing serious. Just some normal childhood worries. School stress, that kind of thing. Dr. Reeves has been wonderful with him. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at my phone. Everything felt off-kilter. Like I was looking at my life through a funhouse mirror where nothing was quite the right shape or size. I tried to remember the text messages Marcus showed me, tried to recall sending them. But there was nothing. Just blank spaces where memories should be. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, going over every interaction I'd had with Marcus and Vanessa over the past few months. Looking for clues. Looking for patterns. And the more I thought about it, the more wrong everything felt. The repeated accusations of forgetfulness. The suggestions that I was declining. The appointment made without my consent. Felt coordinated. Planned. But planned for what purpose? What did they have to gain by making me doubt my own mind? I went to see Dr. Patricia Reeves the following Tuesday as scheduled. Her office was in a professional building downtown. All pale blue walls and abstract art that probably cost more than my monthly pension. The waiting room had magazines that were actually current. Not 6 months old like most doctors' offices. And a receptionist who smiled with perfectly white teeth that looked too big for her face. Mrs. Caldwell? Dr. Reeves will see you now. Dr. Reeves was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun and glasses that made her eyes look larger than they were. She gestured to a comfortable-looking chair across from her desk and waited for me to sit before she spoke. Mrs. Caldwell, thank you for coming in today. I understand your family has some concerns about your well-being. My son and daughter-in-law think I'm losing my mind. Dr. Reeves's expression didn't change. Do you think you're losing your mind? No. I think I'm being gaslit, but I don't know why. That's an interesting perspective. Can you tell me more about why you feel that way? I explained everything. The text messages I didn't remember sending. The phone calls I supposedly made. The breakfast plans that appeared in my calendar, but that Marcus claimed never happened. As I talked, Dr. Reeves took notes, her pen moving across her pad in quick, efficient strokes. And you have no memory of sending these messages or making these calls? None whatsoever. Mrs. Caldwell, I'm going to be very direct with you. Your daughter-in-law Vanessa has already spoken with me at length about her concerns. She's provided me with quite a bit of information about changes she's observed in your behavior over the past 6 months. My stomach dropped. Of course Vanessa had already talked to her. Of course she'd gotten her version of events in first, shaping the narrative before I ever walked through the door. What did she tell you?
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Dr. Reeves hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. She told me that you've become increasingly paranoid, that you've accused her of stealing from you, that you've made inappropriate comments to your grandson about his parents, that you've shown up at their house at odd hours making wild accusations. Every word was a lie. Every single word. But hearing them repeated by a professional, documented in whatever notes Vanessa had provided, made them feel almost real. None of that is true. I've never accused Vanessa of stealing. I haven't made any inappropriate comments to Leo because I barely get to see Leo anymore. And I've never shown up at their house making accusations. Mrs. Caldwell, I want to help you. But I can only do that if you're honest with me about what's been happening. I am being honest. Vanessa is lying to you. And why would she do that? I don't know. That's what I'm trying to figure out. The appointment lasted an hour. By the end of it, I felt wrung out and defeated. Dr. Reeves had been professional and even kind in her way, but I could tell she believed Vanessa's version of events over mine. Why wouldn't she? Vanessa had come in first, established herself as the concerned daughter-in-law trying to help her declining mother-in-law. I was just the confused old woman denying there was a problem. As I was leaving, Dr. Reeves stopped me at the door. Mrs. Caldwell, I'd like to see you again next week. And I'd like to do some cognitive assessments, just to establish a baseline. Fine. Whatever you think is necessary. Over the next few weeks, things got worse. Marcus stopped calling altogether. When I tried to call him, my calls went to voicemail. I drove to their house twice, but nobody answered the door even though I could see lights on inside and heard movement. I left notes asking them to please call me, asking what I'd done wrong, begging them to let me see my grandson. The notes went unanswered. I continued seeing Dr. Reeves weekly. She put me through a battery of cognitive tests, memory tests, problem-solving exercises, questionnaires about my mood and daily activities. I passed everything. My memory was fine. My cognitive function was normal for my age. But somehow that didn't seem to matter. The narrative had been set. I was the declining elderly woman who didn't realize she was declining. Then came the incident at the grocery store. I was shopping on a Wednesday morning, my usual time, when I saw Vanessa in the produce section. Relief flooded through me. Finally, a chance to talk to her face to face to figure out what was going on. Vanessa. I walked toward her, pushing my cart. She looked up and her expression went from neutral to fearful in an instant. A performance. That's what it was. I recognized it even as it was happening. Diane, what are you doing here? I'm grocery shopping. Same as you. Vanessa, please, can we talk? I don't understand what's happening. Why won't Marcus return my calls? Why can't I see Leo? Diane, you're making a scene. Please lower your voice. I wasn't aware I'd raised it. But looking around, I saw other shoppers glancing our way. Vanessa had positioned herself behind her cart like a barrier. I just want to see my grandson. I just want to understand what I did wrong. You need to leave me alone. If you don't, I'm going to call security. She actually pulled out her phone. Actually threatened to have me removed from a public grocery store for the crime of trying to talk to my daughter-in-law. I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just trying to have a conversation. You're harassing me. This is exactly the kind of behavior Dr. Reeves warned me about. The paranoia. The inability to respect boundaries. What boundaries? You've cut me off from my family without explanation. That's not a boundary. That's cruelty. A store manager appeared then, summoned by some invisible signal. Is everything all right here? This woman is bothering me. Vanessa's voice trembled. I've asked her to leave me alone, but she won't. The manager looked at me with sympathy mixed with suspicion. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the store. The humiliation of that moment still burns. Being escorted out of the grocery store I'd shopped at for 20 years, past people I knew from the neighborhood, all because I tried to talk to my son's wife. I sat in my car in the parking lot for an hour afterward, shaking with anger and confusion and shame. That evening Dr. Reeves called me. Not during office hours. At 7 at night. Mrs. Caldwell, I heard about the incident at the grocery store today. Of course she had. Vanessa had probably called her the moment I left. It wasn't an incident. I just tried to talk to Vanessa. Mrs. Caldwell, this pattern of behavior is concerning. The inability to respect boundaries. The paranoid belief that your family is conspiring against you. The aggressive confrontations in public places. It wasn't aggressive. I just wanted to know why I can't see my grandson. I think we need to consider a more intensive treatment plan. Possibly medication to help with the anxiety and paranoia. I don't have anxiety or paranoia. I have a family that's lying about me and I can't figure out why. This is exactly what I mean. This fixation on the idea that everyone is lying. Mrs. Caldwell, when everyone around you is telling you the same thing, you have to consider that they might be right. After that conversation, I stopped answering Dr. Reeves's calls. I stopped going to appointments. What was the point? Every session just gave Vanessa more ammunition, more professional documentation of my supposed decline. I spent my days trying to piece together what was happening and why. I reviewed my bank statements looking for any unusual activity. Nothing. I went through old emails and text messages looking for clues. Nothing. I even hired a private investigator. A tired-looking man named Frank Delgado who charged me $200 an hour to follow Marcus and Vanessa for a week. His report told me nothing I didn't already know. They went to work. They picked up Leo from school. They went to the grocery store and the gym and their friends' houses. Normal life. Except for the part where they'd completely excised me from it. It was Frank who suggested something that hadn't occurred to me. Mrs. Caldwell, in cases like this, when family members isolate an elderly relative and try to paint them as incompetent, there's usually a financial motive. Do you have significant assets? Life insurance? Property? I have my house. It's paid off. Worth maybe $350,000. I have my late husband's life insurance, about $75,000 still in investments. My pension. That's it. Have you checked recently to make sure everything is still in your name? Of course it is. I would know if someone had stolen from me. But Frank's question planted a seed. That evening I pulled out all my financial documents and went through them carefully. Everything seemed in order. The house was still in my name. The investments were untouched. My pension deposited automatically every month. But then I found something strange. A document I didn't remember signing. A healthcare power of attorney dated 6 months ago, naming Marcus as my proxy for medical decisions. My signature was at the bottom, but something about it looked wrong. The way I'd written my middle initial. I always loop it, but this one was straight. I called my lawyer, an old friend of my late husband named Richard Moss. Richard, I need you to look at something. I don't think this signature is mine. I scanned the document and emailed it to him. 20 minutes later my phone rang. Diane, where did you get this? It was in my files. Filed with my other estate documents. But I don't remember signing it. I don't think you did. That's not your signature. I've seen your signature on enough documents to know. Someone forged this. But why? What would they gain from having medical power of attorney over me? Richard was quiet for a long moment. Diane, with that document, Marcus could have you declared mentally incompetent. He could have you committed to a care facility against your will. He could make medical decisions for you without your consent. The room spun. Everything clicked into place. The months of carefully documented confusion. The therapy appointments Vanessa had arranged. The professional opinion of Dr. Reeves that I was paranoid and declining. They weren't trying to steal my money. They were trying to steal my freedom. But I still didn't understand why. What did Marcus and Vanessa have to gain by having me locked away in some facility? Richard, I need you to contest this document. I need you to make it legally clear that this power of attorney is invalid. I'll file the paperwork tomorrow. But Diane, you need to protect yourself. If they're willing to forge documents, if they're willing to go this far, you need to be very careful. That night I didn't sleep at all. I lay in bed watching the shadows move across my ceiling, trying to understand how my son could do this to me. The son I'd raised alone. The son I'd worked 2 jobs to put through college. The son I'd loved with every fiber of my being. How does a child turn into someone capable of such calculated cruelty? The answer came from an unexpected source. My neighbor, Mrs. Patricia Kim, knocked on my door 3 days later holding a casserole dish and wearing an expression of uncomfortable determination. Diane, I need to tell you something. I probably should have told you months ago, but I didn't want to get involved. But after what I overheard yesterday, I can't stay quiet anymore. We sat at my kitchen table, the casserole between us. Mrs. Kim had lived next door for 15 years. We weren't close friends, but we were friendly. She fed my cat when I traveled. I watered her plants. 2 months ago, I heard your son and his wife arguing in your driveway. I was in my garden, but they didn't see me. Vanessa was angry about something. She said they'd waited long enough, that they needed to move faster. Marcus said they had to be patient, that rushing would make people suspicious. Suspicious of what? Mrs. Kim looked down at her hands. Vanessa said something about getting you out of this house so they could sell it and use the money for Leo's treatment. That's when I realized they were talking about having you declared incompetent. Leo's treatment? He's going to therapy for anxiety. That doesn't cost enough to require selling my house. That's what I thought too. But Diane, last week I saw an ambulance at their house. Later I talked to Sharon Morrison, who's friends with Vanessa's sister. Sharon told me that Leo has leukemia. He's been in treatment for 4 months. The world tilted sideways. My grandson had cancer. My 8-year-old grandson had cancer, and nobody had told me. While I was being isolated and gaslit and painted as a crazy old woman, my grandson was fighting for his life and I didn't even know. Mrs. Kim reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm so sorry. I know this must be devastating, but I thought you should know the truth. After she left, I sat alone in my kitchen as evening turned to night. I understood now. Marcus and Vanessa needed money for Leo's treatment. Medical bills for childhood cancer can run into hundreds of thousands of dollars. Insurance doesn't cover everything. And the fastest way to access my assets would be to have me declared incompetent, become my legal guardian, and sell my house. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. They could have just asked me. I would have given them anything for Leo. I would have sold my house myself and moved into a tiny apartment if it meant saving my grandson. But instead, they chose lies and manipulation and legal machinations. Unless there was more to it than money. That thought kept me awake all night. What if they didn't just want my money? What if they wanted me out of the picture entirely? What if I knew something or had seen something that made me a threat? The next morning, I called Frank Delgado again. Frank, I need you to investigate something else. My grandson has leukemia. I need to know everything about his treatment, the doctors, the costs. And I need to know if there's anything unusual about the situation. 2 days later, Frank called me back. Mrs. Caldwell, I found something interesting. Your grandson Leo is being treated at Children's Medical Center. The treatment is aggressive but standard for his type of leukemia. His insurance is covering about 80% of the costs. The out-of-pocket expenses for your son and daughter-in-law are significant but manageable. Maybe $40,000 over the course of treatment. So they don't need to sell my house. No, ma'am. At least not for Leo's medical bills. Then why? That's what doesn't add up. But Mrs. Caldwell, there's something else. In the course of my investigation, I spoke with a nurse at the hospital. She remembered you because you visited Leo during one of his early treatments. Do you remember that? The memory came flooding back. 4 months ago, before the isolation started, Marcus had called and said Leo was in the hospital with pneumonia. I'd gone to visit, brought Leo his favorite books. He'd looked pale and tired, connected to 4 lines. Marcus and Vanessa had been there, but they'd been tense, uncomfortable with my presence. They'd ushered me out after 20 minutes, saying Leo needed rest. Yes, I remember. They said it was pneumonia. The nurse told me something interesting. She said that during that visit you asked Leo if he was scared. He told you he was scared of going home. You asked him why, and he started to answer. But Vanessa interrupted and took him to the bathroom. Do you remember that? I did remember. Leo's face when he said he was scared of going home. The fear in his eyes that seemed too big for a child worried about getting sick again. And Vanessa's sharp interruption, the way she practically dragged Leo away from my bedside. After that visit, you were cut off. No more hospital visits. No more calls. The therapy appointments with Dr. Reeves started. The documentation of your supposed decline began. You think Leo told me something they didn't want me to know? I think it's possible. Mrs. Caldwell, would you be willing to try to talk to Leo? If we could get him alone for a few minutes, maybe he could tell us what's really going on. But I can't get near him. Vanessa threatened to call the police if I approached her or Leo again. What if it wasn't you approaching him? What if it was me, asking innocent questions while you observed from a distance? It felt dangerous. It felt like we were crossing lines that shouldn't be crossed. But I also knew that I was running out of options. Richard had filed paperwork contesting the forged power of attorney. But court proceedings take time. And every week that passed was another week of Marcus and Vanessa building their case against me. Another week of Dr. Reeves documenting my supposed paranoia. We followed Leo's schedule for 3 days. Frank had gotten it from the school's online portal, which wasn't as secure as it should have been. Every afternoon at 3:15, a car service picked Leo up from school and took him to either home or therapy or the hospital depending on the day. On Thursdays he went to the library for an hour, where a tutor helped him keep up with schoolwork he'd missed during treatments. On Thursday afternoon, I sat in my car in the library parking lot wearing sunglasses and a hat like a bad spy movie character. Frank went inside. He'd told me he would approach Leo casually, pretend to be another grandfather in the library, strike up a conversation. 30 minutes later, Frank came back to my car. His expression was grim. Mrs. Caldwell, I think you need to call the police. What happened? What did he say? Frank pulled out his phone and played a recording. He'd been wearing a wire. On the recording, I heard Frank's voice. So your grandmother lives nearby, right? Leo's voice, thin and tired. She used to. But my mom says she's sick now and can't see me anymore. That must be hard. Do you miss her? A long pause. Then Leo, so quietly I had to strain to hear. I'm not supposed to talk about her. Mom says Grandma got confused and said bad things about them. But I don't think Grandma would lie. What kind of bad things? Another pause. The sound of Leo's breathing, fast and shallow. My mom gets really mad sometimes. At Dad. She throws things. One time she hurt him and I told Grandma and Grandma wanted to call someone but Mom found out and got really angry. The recording continued. Leo described a pattern of domestic violence. Vanessa's rages. Marcus's efforts to hide the bruises and broken furniture. Leo's fear that if he told anyone, something terrible would happen. And his relief when his grandmother had witnessed evidence of one of these incidents during that hospital visit. That's why they isolated me. Not just for money. Because I'd seen the truth and Leo had confirmed it. I was a witness to abuse that could destroy their carefully maintained facade. Frank stopped the recording. Mrs. Caldwell, this is beyond financial fraud. This is child endangerment. We need to report this to Child Protective Services immediately. We went straight to the police station. I brought all my documentation. The forged power of attorney. The text messages Marcus claimed I'd sent. The notes from Dr. Reeves that painted me as paranoid. Frank's recording of Leo. The detective who took our statement was a woman in her 40s named Rita Gonzalez. She listened to everything without interruption, taking careful notes. When we finished, she sat back in her chair and let out a long breath. Mrs. Caldwell, this is complicated. Your son and daughter-in-law have built a convincing paper trail suggesting you're experiencing cognitive decline. Even with the forged document, even with the child's testimony, a defense attorney could argue that your entire complaint is the result of paranoid delusions. So you won't help me? I didn't say that. I said it's complicated. But Mrs. Caldwell, that recording of Leo is concerning. The description of domestic violence, the child's fear, that's something we can investigate regardless of the other issues. What happens now? Detective Gonzalez made several phone calls while Frank and I waited. She spoke in low tones, using official language I couldn't quite follow. Finally, she hung up and turned back to us. Child Protective Services is going to conduct a home visit. They're going to interview Leo separately from his parents and assess the situation. In the meantime, I'm going to have a conversation with Dr. Patricia Reeves about her role in all this. That night I barely slept. I kept thinking about Leo, about the fear in his voice on Frank's recording, about how I'd failed to protect him when he tried to tell me the truth, about how Vanessa had isolated me not just to steal my assets, but to prevent me from reporting what I'd witnessed. The next morning Dr. Reeves called me. Her voice was different, shaken, uncertain. "Mrs. Caldwell, I need to speak with you. In person. Would you be willing to meet me at my office?" "Why? So you can document more of my supposed paranoia?" "No. So I can apologize." 2 hours later, I sat across from Dr. Reeves in her office. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. Her perfect bun had come partially undone, and there were shadows under her eyes like she hadn't slept. "Mrs. Caldwell, I received a very disturbing phone call from Detective Gonzalez yesterday. She informed me that you've been subjected to an elaborate scheme to have you declared mentally incompetent, and that I've been an unwitting participant in that scheme." "Unwitting? You took Vanessa's word over mine from day one." "You're right. I did. And I owe you an explanation for why." Dr. Reeves took off her glasses and rubbed her eyes. "When Vanessa first brought Leo to see me 4 months ago, she presented herself as a devoted mother desperately trying to help her son cope with his cancer diagnosis. She was charming, articulate. She cried in my office about how scared she was of losing him, and you believed her. I had no reason not to. Then she mentioned that Leo was very close to his grandmother, and that you'd been behaving strangely, making paranoid accusations, forgetting conversations. She framed it as another source of stress for Leo, having to watch his grandmother decline while he was fighting cancer. So you took her narrative and built on it." "I did more than that. When you came in for your first appointment, I was already primed to see signs of cognitive decline. Every time you denied there was a problem, I interpreted it as lack of insight. Every time you said Vanessa was lying, I documented it as paranoid ideation. I should have been more skeptical. I should have sought independent verification. Instead, I let myself be manipulated." Dr. Reeves stood up and walked to her window, looking out at the parking lot below. "After Detective Gonzalez's call, I reviewed all my notes from Vanessa's sessions. Really reviewed them, looking for inconsistencies. And they're there. Stories that don't quite line up. Details that change from one telling to the next. She's been playing me from the beginning, using me to build a professional paper trail documenting your incompetence. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt tired. Why are you telling me this? Because I was wrong. Profoundly wrong. And because Detective Gonzalez told me that a child may have been harmed because of my failure to see what was really happening." Dr. Reeves turned to face me. "Mrs. Caldwell, I've already contacted the state licensing board and reported myself for ethical violations. I've written a detailed statement for the police explaining how I was manipulated and acknowledging that my professional opinions about your mental state were based on false information. And I'm calling opposing counsel in any legal proceedings your son may have initiated, informing them that I can no longer support any claims about your incompetence. It's a little late for that. I know. And I know an apology doesn't repair the damage I've helped cause. But Mrs. Caldwell, I am deeply, truly sorry. You came to me for help and I failed you in the worst possible way." After I left Dr. Reeves's office, I sat in my car and finally allowed myself to cry. Not just for myself but for Leo. For the little boy caught in the middle of his mother's manipulations. For Marcus, who'd either been manipulated himself or had chosen to protect his wife over his own mother. For the grandmother I'd been 3 months ago who thought she understood her life and her family. That afternoon 2 things happened. First, Richard called to tell me that Child Protective Services had removed Leo from the home pending their investigation. He was staying with Vanessa's sister, a woman I'd met a few times who seemed decent enough. The CPS worker had documented evidence supporting Leo's claims of domestic violence. Vanessa was facing charges. Second, Marcus showed up at my door. He looked terrible. Older. Defeated. He stood on my porch where he'd stood 3 months ago. But this time he wasn't there to tell me I needed help. This time he was crying. "Mom, I'm so sorry." For a long moment I just looked at him. This man who was my son but felt like a stranger. "Come in, Marcus." We sat at my kitchen table. The same table where I'd served him breakfast before school for 12 years. The same table where he'd told me he was getting married. The same table where our lives had split apart. Mom, I don't know how to explain. How to make you understand. Try. Marcus took a shaky breath. It started 2 years ago. Vanessa's rages. First it was just yelling. Then it was throwing things. Then it got physical. She'd hit me, scratch me. One time she broke my collarbone. Why didn't you leave? Because I was terrified she'd get custody of Leo. She threatened that if I tried to divorce her, she'd claim I was abusive. She'd turn Leo against me. She'd make sure I never saw him again. And I believed her because I'd seen her lie so convincingly to other people. Her family. Our friends. She could make anyone believe anything. So you helped her destroy me instead. Marcus put his head in his hands. When Leo got sick, the medical bills were overwhelming even with insurance. Vanessa came up with the plan. She said your house was just sitting there. That you didn't really need it. That we could put you in a nice assisted living place and sell the house and use the money for Leo's treatment. But you didn't need that much money for treatment. Frank investigated. Your out-of-pocket costs are manageable. I know that now. But Vanessa had convinced me we needed $500,000. She showed me fake billing statements. Made it seem impossible. I was desperate, Mom. Leo was dying and I would have done anything to save him. Even forge my signature? Even have me declared incompetent? Marcus nodded, still not looking at me. Vanessa did the forgery. I didn't know about it until after. By then you'd already been to see Dr. Reeves. The plan was in motion. And every time I thought about stopping it, Vanessa would remind me that Leo needed us. That we couldn't fall apart now. That you'd be fine, you'd be taken care of. But Leo told me about Vanessa's violence during that hospital visit. That's why the timeline accelerated. That's why you cut me off completely. Leo was terrified, Mom. He thought if you knew the truth, Vanessa would hurt me worse or hurt him. So when he slipped and mentioned something to you, Vanessa panicked. She said we had to isolate you completely before you could report anything to CPS. And you went along with it. Marcus finally looked up at me. His eyes were red and swollen. I went along with it because I'm a coward. Because I was more afraid of my wife than I was ashamed of what we were doing to you. Because I chose the path of least resistance instead of the path of integrity. The kitchen was quiet except for the sound of Marcus crying. What happens now? He asked. Now you face the consequences of your choices. You'll cooperate fully with the police investigation. You'll testify against Vanessa if necessary. You'll do everything in your power to make sure Leo is safe and gets the help he needs. And what about us? Can you ever forgive me? I don't know, Marcus. Right now I don't even know if I want to try. My phone rang then. It was Detective Gonzalez. Mrs. Caldwell, I wanted you to know that we've arrested Vanessa Morrison. She's being charged with domestic violence, child endangerment, fraud, and forgery. The DA is considering additional charges related to the conspiracy to have you declared incompetent. What about Marcus? That's up to you. He was complicit in the scheme, but he's also a victim of domestic violence. If you want to press charges, we have enough evidence. If you'd prefer to handle this as a family matter with oversight from CPS, that's also an option. I looked at my son sitting across from me. Broken. Ashamed. Still my child even though he'd betrayed me in ways I never imagined possible. I need time to think about it. That's fair. Take all the time you need. After Marcus left, I sat alone in my house. The house I'd almost lost. The life I'd almost had stolen from me. And I thought about forgiveness and justice and what it means to be a family. The next day, I visited Leo for the first time in 3 months. He was staying with Vanessa's sister in a small apartment across town. When he saw me, he ran into my arms and held on like he was afraid I might disappear. Grandma, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't tell you everything. Oh, sweetheart. You were scared. You were trying to protect yourself and your dad. You have nothing to apologize for. We spent the afternoon together. I read him his favorite books. We talked about his treatment, about how he was feeling, about what he wanted to happen next. He was surprisingly clear about it. I don't want to live with Mom anymore. She scares me. But I want to see Dad. Is that okay? That's more than okay. That's exactly right. What about you, Grandma? Are you still sick like Mom said? I was never sick, Leo. Your mom lied about that. I'm perfectly healthy. I knew it. He said it with such confidence. I knew you wouldn't just forget about me. That evening I had dinner with Dr. Reeves. She'd insisted on meeting again, and while I didn't owe her anything, I agreed. We sat in a quiet restaurant and she handed me an envelope. This is a complete copy of all my notes from your case and Leo's case. Everything Vanessa told me, everything I documented. You'll need it for the legal proceedings. Thank you. Dr. Reeves set down her fork and looked at me directly. Mrs. Caldwell, I want you to understand something. What Vanessa did to you isn't uncommon. There's a whole category of financial elder abuse that follows this exact pattern. Isolate the victim. Document cognitive decline with help from complicit medical professionals. Obtain power of attorney or guardianship. Liquidate assets. Most victims never recover what was stolen from them because by the time the truth comes out, they've been so thoroughly gaslit that even they doubt their own competence. Why are you telling me this? Because you fought back. You didn't accept the narrative they were creating. Even when it seemed like everyone believed them, you kept insisting on the truth. That's rare. Most people in your situation eventually give in, accept the label of incompetent or confused, and disappear into the system. I had help. Frank. Richard. Mrs. Kim. You had help because you asked for it. Because you trusted your own mind enough to know something was wrong. We talked for another hour. Dr. Reeves told me about other cases she'd seen, patterns she'd missed. She was using my case as a catalyst to completely overhaul how she evaluated elderly patients. She was requiring independent verification of all family claims. She was documenting inconsistencies more carefully. She was listening to her patients instead of just their relatives. It won't bring back the 3 months I lost, I said. It won't erase the humiliation of being escorted out of the grocery store, or the fear of thinking I was losing my mind. No, but maybe it will prevent it from happening to someone else. 2 weeks later, Marcus and I sat in family court. He'd agreed to testify against Vanessa. He'd accepted a plea deal that involved probation, mandatory counseling, and supervised visitation with Leo. He'd also signed documents restoring all my legal rights and compensating me for damages. Vanessa sat on the other side of the courtroom flanked by her attorneys. She looked smaller without her armor of expensive clothes and perfect makeup. She tried to catch my eye once, but I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. The judge was a stern woman in her 60s who'd clearly seen too many cases like this. Mrs. Morrison, you've been found guilty of multiple counts of fraud, forgery, domestic violence, and conspiracy to commit elder abuse. These are serious crimes that strike at the heart of family bonds and societal trust. Before I pass sentence, do you have anything to say? Vanessa stood up. I could see her calculating, trying to figure out what performance would serve her best now. Finally, she spoke. Your Honor, I was desperate to save my son's life. I made terrible decisions. I hurt people I should have protected. But everything I did was out of love for my child. The judge's expression didn't change. Love doesn't excuse abuse. Love doesn't justify fraud. Love doesn't permit you to destroy another person's life for your own convenience. You had options, Mrs. Morrison. You could have asked for help. You could have been honest about your financial needs. Instead, you chose manipulation and cruelty. Vanessa was sentenced to 5 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 3. She was also ordered to pay restitution, though I doubted I'd ever see that money. Marcus retained limited supervised custody of Leo pending completion of a domestic violence treatment program. After the sentencing, Marcus approached me in the hallway. Mom, thank you for not pressing charges against me. I know I don't deserve your mercy. You don't. But Leo deserves a relationship with his father. That's the only reason I didn't pursue it. Fair enough. Marcus hesitated, then pulled something from his pocket. I found this in Vanessa's things when I was packing up to move. I thought you should have it. It was a journal. Vanessa's journal. Page after page of calculations and plans. She'd been planning to have me declared incompetent almost from the day she married Marcus. The cancer was just an excuse to accelerate the timeline. She'd forged documents months before Leo even got sick. She'd researched guardianship laws and estate liquidation. She'd found Dr. Reeves specifically because she treated other elderly patients and had a reputation for being sympathetic to concerned family members. It was all premeditated. I'm so sorry, Mom. If I'd known how deep it went, how calculated it was, maybe I would have found the courage to stop her sooner. We'll never know, Marcus. All we can do now is move forward and try to be better. 3 months after the trial, I'm sitting on my front porch watching the neighborhood kids play. It's the same porch where this nightmare began, but everything feels different now. Dr. Reeves calls occasionally to check on me and update me on the changes she's implementing in her practice. Frank Delgado has become an unlikely friend, stopping by for coffee and updates on Leo's progress. Richard helped me establish a proper estate plan with safeguards against future manipulation, and Leo visits every weekend. We read together. We talk about his treatment, which is progressing well. We plant vegetables in my garden. We're both healing slowly but surely. Mrs. Kim comes over with a casserole as I'm thinking about all of this. How are you doing today, Diane? I'm good. Really good, actually. She sits beside me on the porch steps. You're stronger than anyone I've ever met. To go through what you went through and come out the other side with your mind intact, your dignity restored, that takes remarkable courage. I had help. So many people who believed me when I couldn't even believe myself sometimes. But you never gave up. That's the key. You kept fighting even when it seemed hopeless. We sit in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the neighborhood I almost lost. My phone rings. It's Marcus. Mom, I wanted to let you know that Leo's latest scans came back clean. The doctors think he's going to make it. That's wonderful news, Marcus. I'm so happy for both of you. I couldn't have gotten through this without you. I know I don't deserve your support after what I did, but I'm grateful for it anyway. You're my son. I'll always love you, even when I don't like you very much. After we hang up, I think about forgiveness and what it means. I haven't forgiven Marcus completely. Maybe I never will. But I'm trying. For Leo's sake. For my own sake. Because holding on to anger takes energy I'd rather spend on building the life I almost lost. Dr. Reeves sends me a letter that evening. In it, she tells me that she's written a paper about my case for a professional journal. She's changed all identifying details, but she wants my permission to publish it. The paper is titled When Family Members Weaponize Mental Health Professionals, a case study in elder abuse. She hopes it will help other therapists recognize the warning signs of manipulation. I give my permission. If my nightmare can prevent even one other person from going through something similar, then maybe it had a purpose beyond just destroying me. That night, I sleep soundly for the first time in months. No nightmares about being locked away. No anxiety about losing my home or my freedom or my identity. Just peace. The next morning, I'm having coffee on my porch when a car pulls up. A woman gets out, maybe 50 years old, looking nervous and determined. Are you Diane Caldwell? I am. My name is Janet Torres. Dr. Reeves gave me your contact information. She said you might be willing to talk to me about your experience. What kind of experience? Janet sits down on the porch steps uninvited. My mother is 75. My brother and his wife have been telling everyone that she's losing her memory, becoming paranoid, can't take care of herself. They've started the process of getting guardianship over her. But my mother is sharp as a tack. She's terrified. She thinks they're trying to steal her assets. And after reading Dr. Reeves's paper, I think she might be right. I look at this woman, this stranger who's come to me because she's fighting the same battle I just won. And I know what I need to do. Come inside. Let me make us some tea. And let me tell you exactly how to fight back. Because that's what survivors do. We don't just survive. We help others survive too. We turn our pain into purpose. We make sure that the cruelty we endured serves as a roadmap for others to find their way out of similar darkness. My name is Diane Caldwell. I'm 63 years old. 3 months ago, I thought I was losing my mind. Today, I know I was just losing my family. But I got my life back. I got my freedom back. I got my truth back. And now I'm here to help others do the same. The weeks following Janet Torres's visit became a turning point in ways I never anticipated. She wasn't the only one who found me. Word spread through support groups and legal aid societies that there was a woman who'd successfully fought back against a guardianship scheme. My phone started ringing with calls from strangers desperate for guidance. Adult children worried about their aging parents. Elderly people who felt trapped by families they no longer recognized. Lawyers looking for expert testimony in similar cases. I didn't set out to become an advocate. I just wanted to help people avoid the hell I'd been through. But somehow, helping others became the thing that truly healed me. Every person I counseled, every family I helped navigate the legal system, every victory against manipulative relatives felt like reclaiming another piece of myself that Vanessa had tried to steal. Detective Gonzalez called me one morning about 6 weeks after Vanessa's sentencing. Her voice carried an unusual weight, something beyond the professional courtesy she'd always shown me. "Mrs. Caldwell, I need to tell you something that might be difficult to hear. We've been investigating Vanessa's background more thoroughly as part of the ongoing case. What we found is disturbing." I gripped the phone tighter. "What did you find?" "Vanessa Morrison isn't her real name. She changed it legally 8 years ago. Her birth name was Vanessa Hartley, and she has a criminal record in Oregon under that name. Fraud. Identity theft. She served 18 months in prison before moving to our state and reinventing herself." My stomach turned. Marcus married her without knowing any of this? She created an entirely new identity, new social security number through illegal means, fake employment history, fabricated references. Your son met someone who didn't exist. Someone carefully constructed to seem trustworthy and normal. Did Marcus know? Was he part of it? We don't believe so. Everything we've uncovered suggests Vanessa targeted your son specifically because of his stable income and family connections. More specifically, because he had an elderly mother with assets and no other close relatives who might interfere. So I was the target from the beginning. Not just an obstacle that appeared later. The actual goal. Detective Gonzalez was quiet for a moment. "Mrs. Caldwell, we found journals going back 7 years. Vanessa had researched you before she ever met Marcus. She knew about your house, your investments, your late husband's life insurance. She knew you lived alone. She engineered the entire relationship with your son as a way to access you. The betrayal cut even deeper than before. My son hadn't just been manipulated by his wife. He'd been deliberately hunted and used as a tool to get to me. Everything about their relationship had been a calculated lie from the very first date. There's more. Vanessa has done this before. We found evidence of at least 2 other similar schemes in Oregon and Washington. In both cases, she married men with elderly parents who had assets. In both cases, those parents ended up in questionable care facilities while their homes were sold. One of those elderly victims died within 6 months of being institutionalized. Died from what? Officially, pneumonia. But the victim's other relatives suspected foul play. They just couldn't prove anything because Vanessa had already moved on by then. Changed her name again. Started over in a new state. I felt sick. If Leo hadn't told me the truth during that hospital visit, if I hadn't fought back, I could have been victim number 3. Dead within months, my assets liquidated. My son left alone to grieve a mother he'd been convinced was mentally incompetent. We're coordinating with law enforcement in Oregon and Washington. There may be additional charges filed. But Mrs. Caldwell, I wanted you to hear this from me first. The woman who tried to destroy you is a career criminal. This was never about desperation or medical bills. It was a long con and you were the mark. After Detective Gonzalez hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at nothing, processing the magnitude of what I'd escaped. Vanessa hadn't just been cruel or greedy. She'd been a predator who'd spent years perfecting her technique. And I'd welcomed her into my family, trusted her with my son, loved my grandson who carried half her DNA. That thought sent me spiraling. Leo, what would this revelation do to him? He was only 8 years old, fighting cancer, already traumatized by witnessing his mother's violence. Now he'd have to learn that his mother was a career criminal who'd never loved his father, who'd manufactured their entire family as part of an elaborate theft scheme. I called Marcus immediately. "We need to talk. In person. Now." He arrived 30 minutes later looking terrified. "Mom, what's wrong? Is it Leo? Did something happen with his treatment?" "Leo's fine. But we need to discuss what Detective Gonzalez just told me about Vanessa's real identity." I watched the color drain from Marcus's face as I explained everything. The fake name. The criminal history. The previous victims. The journals documenting her research into our family before she'd ever met him. With each revelation, he seemed to shrink further into himself. When I finished, he was crying. Not the quiet tears from before, but deep, wrenching sobs that shook his whole body. "Mom, I brought this into our lives. I brought a monster into our family. Everything I thought was real, my marriage, my wife's love for Leo, all of it was just a performance. A manipulation. You couldn't have known. She was a professional con artist with years of experience. But I should have seen something. Some sign. How could I live with someone for 9 years and not know she was capable of this? Because she was good at what she did, Marcus. She fooled doctors and lawyers and police. She would have fooled anyone." Marcus wiped his eyes roughly. "What do I tell Leo? How do I explain that his mother never actually loved any of us? That he was just a prop in her scheme? You don't. Not yet. He's 8 years old fighting leukemia. He needs stability and security right now, not more trauma. We tell him age-appropriate truths. That his mother made very bad choices and hurt people. That she's in prison because she broke serious laws. The rest can wait until he's older and stronger. What if he asks if she ever loved him?" The question hung in the air between us. What if Leo asked the one question that would break whatever remained of his childhood innocence? Then we tell him that we don't know what was real and what wasn't, but that it doesn't matter because he is deeply loved by the people who are here now. By you. By me. By the family who chose to stay. Marcus nodded slowly. "Can I ask you something? Why are you being so kind to me about this? I helped her. I went along with her plan to destroy you. You should hate me." I thought about that question. About hate and love and the complicated mess of family relationships. About how Marcus was both perpetrator and victim. Both my betrayer and my son. I don't hate you, Marcus. I'm disappointed. I'm hurt. Sometimes I'm angry. But I don't hate you. You're my child. And despite everything, I still love you. I just also need you to understand that love doesn't erase consequences. You'll be earning back my trust for a very long time. I know. And Mom, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make this right. For you. For Leo. For everyone Vanessa hurt. After Marcus left, I called the 2 relatives from Vanessa's previous victims. Detective Gonzalez had given me their contact information with permission to reach out. Both conversations were heartbreaking in their similarity to my own experience. The first was Helen Brenner, whose mother-in-law had been the victim in Oregon. Helen's voice was thick with old grief and anger. Margaret was 72 when Vanessa married Helen's son Tom. Within a year, Margaret was in a memory care facility claiming she had dementia. Within 18 months she was dead. We tried to fight it, but Vanessa had doctors and lawyers backing her up. She made it look like we were the unreasonable ones, unwilling to accept Margaret's decline. Did you suspect at the time that something was wrong? We knew something was wrong. Margaret was sharp as a tack until suddenly she wasn't. The decline was too fast, too convenient. But Vanessa had documentation, medical records, professional opinions. What could we do against that? What happened after Margaret died? Vanessa divorced Tom 6 months later. Took half of everything in the settlement, including half the proceeds from Margaret's house sale. Then she disappeared. Changed her name, we found out later. Started over somewhere else. Tom was devastated. He blamed himself for not protecting his mother. He died 2 years later. Heart attack. But I think it was really a broken heart. I'm so sorry. If I'd known, if we'd been able to stop her sooner, maybe your mother-in-law would still be alive. Helen's voice softened. Mrs. Caldwell, from what Detective Gonzalez told me, you did stop her. You fought back when everyone told you you were crazy. You protected your grandson. You survived. That's more than Margaret got to do. More than any of Vanessa's other victims managed. The second call was to Robert Chun, whose father had been victimized in Washington. Robert's story was eerily similar. A whirlwind romance between Vanessa and Robert's brother David. Quick marriage. Then suddenly their father Thomas was showing signs of confusion and paranoia. Within months Thomas was in a facility. His house was sold. He died of pneumonia within the year. The thing that haunts me most, Robert said, is that my father kept insisting nothing was wrong with him. Kept saying Vanessa was lying. But we believed the doctors. We believed the professional assessments. We thought Dad was just in denial about his decline. By the time we realized something was genuinely wrong, it was too late. He was gone. Did Vanessa show any remorse after your father died? None. She seemed inconvenienced by the funeral arrangements. She divorced David 3 months later. We never saw her again. Both conversations left me shaken. I'd been so close to becoming another statistic in Vanessa's trail of destruction. If Leo hadn't spoken up, if I hadn't trusted my own judgment, if I hadn't found allies like Frank and Richard who believed me, I could have been dead within months, just another elderly woman who declined rapidly and died of pneumonia in a care facility. That evening, I couldn't stop thinking about Margaret Brenner and Thomas Chan. 2 lives cut short by a predator who saw elderly people as nothing more than assets to be liquidated. 2 families torn apart by grief and guilt. How many others were there that we didn't know about? How many times had Vanessa successfully executed this scheme before finally getting caught? I called Detective Gonzalez back. We need to find all of Vanessa's victims. Everyone she's hurt. They deserve to know the truth. We're trying, Mrs. Caldwell. But she's been careful. Multiple name changes. Gaps in her employment history that suggest she may have been doing this even more frequently than we thought. We're working with the FBI now because she's crossed state lines multiple times. What can I do to help? Actually, there is something. The FBI is building a profile of her methods. They'd like to interview you extensively about exactly how she operated in your case, the manipulation tactics she used, the way she built her credibility with professionals. Your insights could help them identify other potential victims, or stop her if she's inspired any copycat criminals. I'll do whatever it takes. The FBI interview took place over 3 days in a bland government office building. The lead investigator was a woman named Special Agent Karen Whitmore, who specialized in financial crimes against the elderly. She was thorough and compassionate, asking questions that forced me to relive every moment of the nightmare, but also helping me see patterns I hadn't noticed before. Mrs. Caldwell, one thing that stands out in your case is how Vanessa used your love for your grandson as leverage. She knew that threatening your access to Leo would be devastating. That's a common tactic with these predators. They find your pressure points and exploit them mercilessly. She also isolated me from other support systems, making me doubt my own mind so I wouldn't trust my perceptions, making sure I looked paranoid to anyone I might try to tell. Exactly. And she enlisted professional help to legitimize her narrative. Dr. Reeves, your son, even strangers at the grocery store who witnessed the confrontation. She created a whole ecosystem of people who believed you were incompetent. That's sophisticated criminal behavior. Agent Whitmore showed me a chart mapping Vanessa's known movements over the past 15 years. There were gaps, long stretches where she seemed to disappear from all records. Those gaps terrified me more than the documented crimes. We believe during these gaps she was operating under identities we haven't uncovered yet. Based on the pattern, she typically spent 2 to 3 years in each location. Long enough to marry, establish credibility, execute the scheme, and move on. If our theory is correct, there could be a dozen or more victims we don't know about. A dozen elderly people possibly dead because of one woman's greed. The scope of it was staggering. Why elderly victims specifically? Why not just rob banks or commit other types of fraud? Agent Whitmore leaned back in her chair. Several reasons. First, elderly people often have accumulated assets, paid-off houses, life insurance policies, retirement savings. Second, there's a societal bias that makes people more willing to believe elderly individuals are experiencing cognitive decline. Third, elderly victims are often isolated from broader support networks. Adult children may live far away. Spouses may have already passed. It makes them vulnerable in ways Vanessa could exploit. She pulled out another document. Also, and this is particularly disturbing, elderly victims who die in care facilities rarely trigger thorough investigations. If an 80-year-old dies of pneumonia in a nursing home, it's seen as tragic but expected. Nobody looks for signs of deliberate harm. Nobody questions whether they should have been in that facility in the first place. So she was killing them and getting away with it because society expects old people to die. In essence, yes. It's a form of ageism that creates opportunities for predators. We believe Vanessa understood this and used it systematically. Over those 3 days, I told Agent Whitmore everything. The forged documents, the fake text messages, Dr. Reeves's unwitting complicity, Vanessa's performance at the grocery store, the medication that would have sedated me into actual confusion, every detail of her method. On the third day, Agent Whitmore asked me something unexpected. "Mrs. Caldwell, would you be willing to speak publicly about your experience? We're trying to raise awareness about this type of elder abuse. Victims rarely come forward because they're ashamed, or because they died before they could tell their stories. You survived. Your voice could make a difference." The idea terrified me. Going public meant exposing my pain and humiliation to strangers. It meant reliving the trauma over and over in interviews and speeches. But it also meant that Margaret Brenner and Thomas Chan, and all the unnamed victims might not have died in vain. Yes, I'll do it. My first public appearance was at a senior center 3 towns over. Agent Whitmore had arranged for me to speak at a workshop about protecting yourself from financial exploitation. I stood in front of 40 elderly people and their adult children and told them everything that had happened to me. The shame I'd expected to feel never came. Instead, I felt powerful. I watched recognition dawn on faces in the audience. People who dismissed their own concerns about declining relatives. People who'd been told they were overreacting when they questioned a family member's sudden confusion. People who were currently fighting battles similar to mine. After my presentation, a dozen people approached me with their own stories. An elderly man whose daughter had convinced him to sign over power of attorney and was now draining his accounts. A middle-aged woman whose stepmother was trying to have her father declared. What can I do to help? Actually, there is something. The FBI is building a profile of her methods. They'd like to interview you extensively about exactly how she operated in your case, the manipulation tactics she used, the way she built her credibility with professionals. Your insights could help them identify other potential victims, or stop her if she's inspired any copycat criminals. I'll do whatever it takes. The FBI interview took place over 3 days in a bland government office building. The lead investigator was a woman named Special Agent Karen Whitmore, who specialized in financial crimes against the elderly. She was thorough and compassionate, asking questions that forced me to relive every moment of the nightmare, but also helping me see patterns I hadn't noticed before. "Mrs. Caldwell, one thing that stands out in your case is how Vanessa used your love for your grandson as leverage. She knew that threatening your access to Leo would be devastating. That's a common tactic with these predators. They find your pressure points and exploit them mercilessly. She also isolated me from other support systems, making me doubt my own mind so I wouldn't trust my perceptions, making sure I looked paranoid to anyone I might try to tell." Exactly. And she enlisted professional help to legitimize her narrative. Dr. Reeves, your son, even strangers at the grocery store who witnessed the confrontation. She created a whole ecosystem of people who believed you were incompetent. That's sophisticated criminal behavior. Agent Whitmore showed me a chart mapping Vanessa's known movements over the past 15 years. There were gaps, long stretches where she seemed to disappear from all records. Those gaps terrified me more than the documented crimes. We believe during these gaps she was operating under identities we haven't uncovered yet. Based on the pattern, she typically spent 2 to 3 years in each location. Long enough to marry, establish credibility, execute the scheme, and move on. If our theory is correct, there could be a dozen or more victims we don't know about. A dozen elderly people possibly dead because of one woman's greed. The scope of it was staggering. Why elderly victims specifically? Why not just rob banks or commit other types of fraud? Agent Whitmore leaned back in her chair. Several reasons. First, elderly people often have accumulated assets, paid-off houses, life insurance policies, retirement savings. Second, there's a societal bias that makes people more willing to believe elderly individuals are experiencing cognitive decline. Third, elderly victims are often isolated from broader support networks. Adult children may live far away. Spouses may have already passed. It makes them vulnerable in ways Vanessa could exploit. She pulled out another document. Also, and this is particularly disturbing, elderly victims who die in care facilities rarely trigger thorough investigations. If an 80-year-old dies of pneumonia in a nursing home, it's seen as tragic but expected. Nobody looks for signs of deliberate harm. Nobody questions whether they should have been in that facility in the first place. So she was killing them and getting away with it because society expects old people to die. In essence, yes. It's a form of ageism that creates opportunities for predators. We believe Vanessa understood this and used it systematically. Over those 3 days, I told Agent Whitmore everything. The forged documents, the fake text messages, Dr. Reeves's unwitting complicity, Vanessa's performance at the grocery store, the medication that would have sedated me into actual confusion, every detail of her method. On the 3rd day, Agent Whitmore asked me something unexpected. "Mrs. Caldwell, would you be willing to speak publicly about your experience? We're trying to raise awareness about this type of elder abuse. Victims rarely come forward because they're ashamed or because they died before they could tell their stories. You survived. Your voice could make a difference." The idea terrified me. Going public meant exposing my pain and humiliation to strangers. It meant reliving the trauma over and over in interviews and speeches. But it also meant that Margaret Brenner and Thomas Chan, and all the unnamed victims might not have died in vain. Yes, I'll do it. My first public appearance was at a senior center 3 towns over. Agent Whitmore had arranged for me to speak at a workshop about protecting yourself from financial exploitation. I stood in front of 40 elderly people and their adult children and told them everything that had happened to me. The shame I'd expected to feel never came. Instead, I felt powerful. I watched recognition dawn on faces in the audience. People who dismissed their own concerns about declining relatives. People who'd been told they were overreacting when they questioned a family member's sudden confusion. People who were currently fighting battles similar to mine. After my presentation, a dozen people approached me with their own stories. An elderly man whose daughter had convinced him to sign over power of attorney and was now draining his accounts. A middle-aged woman whose stepmother was trying to have her father declared. Getting help. You're protecting Leo. You're facing your failures instead of running from them. That's what good fathers do. Marcus's eyes filled with tears. I wish I could go back and do everything differently. I wish I'd been strong enough to stand up to Vanessa from the beginning. But you can't go back. None of us can. All we can do is use what we learned to make better choices going forward. Dr. Reeves continued to check in regularly. She'd published her paper on my case, changing identifying details but keeping the core elements intact. The response from her professional community had been overwhelmingly positive. Other therapists were reaching out asking for guidance on how to avoid being manipulated by family members with hidden agendas. But she'd also faced criticism from some colleagues who felt she'd been negligent, who argued that she should have recognized the signs earlier, should have sought independent verification, should have questioned Vanessa's narrative more thoroughly. "Mrs. Caldwell," Dr. Reeves said during one of our coffee meetings, "I want you to know that I've accepted the criticism. I deserved it. I failed you and I failed my profession. But I'm trying to use that failure to become better. You've already done more than most people would. You admitted your mistake publicly. You're changing how you practice. You're helping other professionals avoid the same errors. It's not enough. It will never be enough to erase what I helped Vanessa do to you." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Patricia, you were a tool she used. Just like Marcus was a tool. Just like that grocery store manager was a tool. Vanessa was exceptionally good at finding people's weaknesses and exploiting them. You have to forgive yourself at some point. How did you forgive Marcus? After everything he did to you? I haven't fully forgiven him yet. I'm working on it. But I started by recognizing that he's also a victim. That doesn't excuse his actions, but it does contextualize them. And context matters." Dr. Reeves nodded slowly. "I've been so focused on my professional failure that I haven't really processed the fact that I was also manipulated. That Vanessa played me just as thoroughly as she played everyone else." "Exactly. And recognizing that doesn't diminish your responsibility. It just helps you understand the full picture." Our relationship had evolved into something unexpected. She was no longer my therapist and I was no longer her patient. We were 2 women who'd been caught in the same web of deception, helping each other find ways to move forward. 6 months after Vanessa's sentencing, the FBI made a breakthrough. They'd found evidence of 3 more victims in California and Nevada. All elderly. All with adult children who'd married Vanessa under different names. All had died within months of being placed in care facilities. Agent Whitmore called to tell me the news. "Mrs. Caldwell, we're building a federal case now. Multiple counts of wire fraud, identity theft, and potentially murder in 2 of the cases where we have evidence suggesting Vanessa may have directly contributed to the victims' deaths. Murder? She actually killed people? We can't prove it conclusively yet. But in 2 cases, the victims died of what was listed as accidental medication overdoses. Both had been healthy before being institutionalized. Both had large life insurance policies that benefited the families, including Vanessa as the spouse of the adult child. It's suspicious enough that we're pursuing murder charges. I felt sick. I'd been so focused on what Vanessa tried to do to me that I hadn't fully grasped that she might actually be a serial killer. That my survival wasn't just about keeping my assets and my freedom. It was about staying alive. If we can prove murder in even one case, she'll be looking at life in prison without parole instead of just 5 years for fraud. Good. She needs to be locked away forever. She's too dangerous to ever be released. After that call, I had nightmares for weeks. Dreams where I was in the care facility Vanessa had chosen for me. Where I was given medication that made my mind fuzzy. Where I tried to call for help but couldn't remember the numbers. Where I died alone and confused while Vanessa sold my house and moved on to her next victim. I woke from these nightmares gasping, my heart racing, drenched in sweat. Leo was usually in the next room during his weekend visits, and I didn't want to wake him with my terror. So I'd sit in my kitchen in the dark, drinking tea and reminding myself that I was safe. That I'd survived. That Vanessa was in prison and would likely never get out. But the nightmares persisted. Finally, I did something I'd been resisting. I started seeing a therapist myself. Not Dr. Reeves, though she'd offered. Someone completely unconnected to the case who could help me process the trauma without the baggage of our complicated history. My new therapist was a calm older man named Dr. Raymond Foster, who specialized in trauma recovery. He didn't try to fix me or rush my healing. He just sat with me while I talked through the terror and the anger and the grief for the life I'd almost lost. Mrs. Caldwell, Dr. Foster said during one session, "You're experiencing symptoms of PTSD. That's completely normal given what you've been through. The nightmares, the hypervigilance, the difficulty trusting people, all of that is your brain trying to protect you from being hurt again. But Vanessa's in prison. I'm safe now. Your rational mind knows that. But trauma lives in a different part of the brain. The part that doesn't process logic, only survival. That part of your brain is still trying to keep you safe from a threat that no longer exists. How do I make it stop? You don't make it stop. You learn to live with it. You develop coping strategies. You gradually retrain your brain to understand that you're safe. It's a process, not an event. The therapy helped. Slowly, the nightmares became less frequent. I developed tools for managing anxiety when it spiked. I learned to recognize triggers and give myself permission to feel whatever I was feeling without judgment. But I also learned something else. That healing isn't linear. That there would be good days and bad days. That just because I was strong enough to speak publicly about my experience didn't mean I was strong enough to get through every moment without falling apart. And that was okay. It had to be okay because the alternative was pretending to be fine when I wasn't, and I'd spent too many months being gaslit about my own reality to start lying to myself now. 1 year after Vanessa's initial sentencing, I was invited to speak at a national conference on elder abuse prevention. The audience included social workers, lawyers, law enforcement, healthcare professionals, and policymakers. Standing at that podium looking out at hundreds of people, I felt the weight of every victim who couldn't be there to tell their story. My name is Diane Caldwell. 1 year ago, my daughter-in-law attempted to have me declared mentally incompetent so she could steal my assets and possibly end my life. Today, I'm here to make sure what happened to me never happens to anyone else. I told them everything. The systematic isolation, the forged documents, the manipulation of medical professionals, the creation of a false narrative that made me doubt my own sanity, the courage it took to fight back when everyone told me I was wrong. But I also told them about the survivors. About Sandra Martinez who'd heard me speak and found the strength to save herself. About the dozen other people who'd contacted me after my various speeches with stories of how they'd recognized the warning signs and protected themselves or their loved ones. This isn't just about one criminal, I said. This is about a system that makes it too easy for predators to exploit elderly people. About ageist assumptions that make us too willing to believe someone is declining. About the lack of safeguards to verify claims of incompetence before stripping people of their rights. The standing ovation when I finished brought tears to my eyes. But more importantly, it brought conversations. Policymakers approached me asking for input on new legislation. Healthcare administrators asked for training materials. Law enforcement wanted to know how to better identify these cases early. Change was happening. Slowly, but it was happening. That evening, back in my hotel room, I received a call from Helen Brenner, the daughter-in-law of Vanessa's Oregon victim. She'd been following the federal case and wanted to thank me. "Mrs. Caldwell, because of your courage in fighting back, because you survived and told your story, my mother-in-law's death is finally being investigated as a potential homicide. After all these years of knowing something was wrong but not being able to prove it, we might finally get justice for Margaret. I'm so glad. She deserved so much better than what happened to her. We all did. But you're the one who stopped Vanessa. You're the one who made sure she couldn't hurt anyone else. That means everything to me and my family." After we hung up, I thought about Margaret Brenner, who I'd never met but who haunted me nonetheless. I thought about Thomas Chun, about the unnamed victims in California and Nevada, about all the people who died alone and afraid because a monster had decided their lives were worth less than their assets. And I made a promise to them, to Margaret and Thomas and all the others. I would keep fighting, keep speaking, keep advocating for change. Their deaths wouldn't be meaningless. They would be the catalyst that protected future victims. Leo called me that night, which was unusual since it wasn't our scheduled call time. "Grandma, I just wanted to hear your voice. Is everything okay, sweetheart?" "Yeah. I just was thinking about how you almost went away. How Mom tried to make you disappear. And I wanted to make sure you were still there." "I'm here, Leo. I'm always here. I know. But sometimes I still get scared that I'll wake up and you'll be gone. That it will turn out to be a dream and everything will go back to how it was. I understand that fear. I have it too sometimes. But Leo, we're both awake now. We both know the truth. And we're both safe. Your mom can't hurt us anymore. Promise? Promise." After Leo hung up, I realized that my recovery and his recovery were intertwined. We were both learning to trust again. Both learning that not everyone who claims to love you actually does. Both learning that survival means more than just staying alive. It means rebuilding a life worth living. The federal trial began 18 months after Vanessa's initial state conviction. The prosecution had built an overwhelming case. Financial records, testimony from victims' families, expert witnesses on elder abuse patterns, and most damning, evidence from Vanessa's own journals detailing her methods and her victims. I testified on the second day. Walking into that federal courtroom and seeing Vanessa again after so long made my hands shake. She looked older, harder. Prison had stripped away the polished veneer she'd worn during her time with our family. But her eyes were the same. Cold. Calculating. Entirely empty of remorse. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Linda Harrison, led me through my testimony. I explained how Vanessa had systematically isolated me, how she'd manipulated Marcus and Dr. Reeves, how she'd forged documents and created false medical narratives, how she'd planned to institutionalize me and sell my home, and how she would have succeeded if not for my grandson's courage in telling me the truth. "Mrs. Caldwell," Prosecutor Harrison asked, "if Leo hadn't spoken up, if you hadn't fought back, what do you believe would have happened to you?" I looked directly at Vanessa as I answered. "Based on what happened to Margaret Brenner and Thomas Chan and the other victims, I believe I would have been institutionalized against my will. I believe I would have been medicated to the point of actual confusion. I believe my house would have been sold and my assets liquidated. And I believe I would have died within months, either from deliberate harm or from the despair of losing everything that made my life worth living." The jury's faces reflected horror and disgust. Several of them were looking at Vanessa like she was a particularly venomous snake. The defense tried to paint Vanessa as a desperate mother who'd made bad choices trying to save her sick child. But the evidence was overwhelming. The previous victims, the forged documents, the journals that proved premeditation, the expert testimony about her sophisticated con artist techniques. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The jury deliberated for less than 8 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts: federal wire fraud, identity theft, and most significantly, 2 counts of second-degree murder in the deaths of Margaret Brenner and Thomas Chan. At the sentencing hearing, the judge was merciless. Vanessa Morrison received 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole plus 40 years for the fraud charges. The judge cited her complete lack of remorse and the calculated nature of her crimes spanning over a decade. She would die in prison, and everyone in that courtroom knew it. I felt no satisfaction watching her being led away in shackles. Only a profound sadness for all the lives she destroyed and all the years stolen from people who deserved so much better. Margaret and Thomas would never get their lives back. Their families would never stop grieving. But at least justice had finally been served. Marcus and Leo were waiting for me outside the courthouse. Leo ran to me and wrapped his arms around my waist, holding on tight. His latest scans had shown complete remission. The doctors were calling him their miracle patient. He'd survived cancer and survived his mother's toxicity. He was going to be okay. Marcus looked older but steadier. The guilt would probably never fully leave him, but he was learning to carry it better. He'd moved into a smaller apartment and started working with a nonprofit that helped domestic violence victims, turning his pain into purpose just like I had. We went for ice cream that afternoon, the three of us together. No talk of trials or prison or betrayal. Just a grandmother, her son, and her grandson eating ice cream and watching the world go by. Normal. Peaceful. Safe. That evening I returned home to find my porch covered in flowers and cards. Dozens of them from people I'd helped over the past year. From Sandra Martinez and Helen Brenner and Robert Chan and so many others whose lives had intersected with mine through shared trauma and shared survival. One card in particular caught my attention. It was from Dr. Reeves. Inside, she'd written only a few words, but they meant everything. Thank you for teaching me that believing victims is the most important thing we can do. You changed how I practice medicine and how I see the world. I will never forget the lessons you taught me. I stood on my porch as the sun set, surrounded by flowers and proof that pain could be transformed into something beautiful, something meaningful, something that protected others from suffering the same fate. My name is Diane Caldwell. I'm 64 years old now. I survived an attempt to steal my life, my mind, and my freedom. And I turned that survival into a mission to protect others. The fight isn't over. There are still predators like Vanessa out there. Still vulnerable elderly people at risk. Still families being torn apart by greed and manipulation. But there are also survivors like me who refuse to stay silent. Who speak up. Who fight back. Who turn their darkest moments into light for others. And that makes all the difference. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.